This is Tim Korsnoy from Bare Bones Wargaming saying you should be watching No Enemies Here, board gaming news, otherwise you're going to feel like little isolated Poland, alone and uninformed.
Gives you his intro and ramblings on the Civil War Brigade series with the Seven Pines game from The Gamers. This is a 1 to 2 player game designed by Dean Essig and David A. Powell, published by The Gamers. Please visit Dean Essig's GoFundMe page. Lock and Load has Gimpy's video on Nations at War 3.0 core rules set. This is the Boot Camp series Overwatch. Kyle Seeley takes a look at Murphy's Bro from Miaquinto as well. He looks at other games. The War Game Reviewer is taking a look at Helsinki 1918, German intervention to the Finnish Civil War. This is a game designed by Hannu Uusitalo. I hope I pronounced it properly, but I didn't. Published by UNP Games. The man famously known as Calandale, Enrico Viglino, sporting a new do, takes a look at Talon, or keeps looking at Talon this week, a game designed by Jim Crone. ARDWULF of ARDWULF'S LAIR is giving you his previews of Origin 2019. BLASTPOP takes a look at Newtown, designed by Don Hanley and Mark Miklos. This is a game published by GMT. MARCOWARGAMER takes a look at the Italian magazine Parabellum. AJ Toynbee of Hexes and Soldiers is being his weird self and combining two battle base sets on Command & Color's epic battle map board with custom terrain tiles. Gimpy of the Gimpy Gamers giving you an overview of Fields of Fire 2 with the old breed, and he actually talks about a box and a lid. The box and the lid that comes from Fields of Fire 2. Gimpy is also doing something special. He's previewing DVG's Valkyrie. NAPOLEONS Triumph is giving you a session report on Cuba Libre, published by GMT, designed by Volko Haruke and Jeff Grossman. Player's Aid review Command & Color's Medieval from GMT and unbox Gandhi from GMT. They also preview David Thompson's Europe Divided, published by Phalanx. And here's Dave.
Hey guys, Dave here from the Centurions Review, the punk rock band of wargame review institutions. This week on our website we will be reviewing Melee from Steve Jackson Games. They've re-released the game. It was originally from Metagaming. It's a man-to-man combat game, kind of like gladiatorial combat. You can fight against humans, you can fight against fantasy creatures, against animals. It's just fantastic. And best of all, the game was going for around $50 to $100 on eBay for used copies. You can now get it for, I kid you not, $14.95 from Steve Jackson Games, which is fantastic. On our YouTube channel, we'll be doing a first look at Holy War from Metagaming. It's microgame number 13. It's from the late 1970s. It's spaceship combat with a really interesting storyline about a holy war in outer space. We'll also be doing a first look at the zombie apocalypse survival game. It looks like it's a self-published game from Mike Brines. What's unique about this zombie game is it uses wargame mechanics, but it has a board that looks like a Monopoly board. So it's completely unique. You guys got to take a look at this because you'll never see anything like this anywhere else. The last game we'll be taking a look at is Asteroid 04 from Task Force Games. That's microgame number 2. In this game, the Russians and the United States both have installations on 2 separate asteroids, and a war breaks out, and they're attacking each other with nuclear missiles and conventional warheads. Essentially, you're trying to do as much damage to each other's installations as possible, and you have units that can repair the damage. It's just a fantastic looking game. I hope to see you guys soon on our website and our YouTube channel. Have a good evening.
Rob Moffat wants to know what's happening on the big board. You want to know what's happening on the big board, Rob Moffat? Kevin is taking a look at Omaha landings from the Tactical Combat series. Also, he takes a look at Mike Denson's last 100 yards game plan mission number 1, and he butchers a French game's name. He says something like blah, 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 but it's the Last Eagles, quatre bras, not blah, 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 blah. Yeah, bloody. Kevin, CEO, big man. You make a lot of cash, eh? Because you're CEO, you're the big man of the big board, president for life. You know, I speak French, Kevin. I won't charge you too much. You can afford some French lessons, eh? Mo of Mo's Game Tables unboxing Fields of Fire 2 with the Old Breed. A game published by GMT, designed by Ben Hull. Edward of Heavy Cardboard is doing a playthrough and teaching of Ottoman Sunset, a game published by Victory Point Games, designed by Darren Leveloff. I'm having a hard time here. Darren Leveloff. And the guys at Little Wars TV have a video entitled Spending. This is how much the average wargamer spends. You might not want to watch this one. Rob Orne, the strong man of wargames in Rob's Tabletop World, is checking out in his segment War and Pieces, Rifles in the Pacific, a game designed by Gottardo Zancani, published by Tiny Battle Publishing. Wayne Hansen in his Recon section has taken a look at With It or On It. This is a Shields and Swords Ancients game by everybody's kid brother, designed by Tom Russell, and published by Hollenspiel. DVG and David Thompson's For What Remains. What Remains is a skirmish-level wargame set in a post-apocalyptic near future. It's a 2-player competitive game and can be played solitaire. Bad Crow Games and Company of Heroes. This is a real-time strategy or turn-based World War II 2-player game. Sergio Schiavi's World War II The Italian Campaign 1943 to 1944 war game from Salerno to Rome is on its last legs on Kickstarter. David Thompson and Chris Marling's Europe Divided by Phalanx Games. Europe Divided is a game of an expansionist Europe, a resurgent Russia, and a new Cold War. And I was fortunate enough to have been granted an interview with David Thompson, the co-designer of Europe Divided, and you know what? I'm going to show it to you here. Hi, my name is Dan Pancaldi of No Enemies Here, and I'm here to ask David Thompson, the designer of Europe Divided, some hard questions, so you don't have to. Okay, David Thompson, I want to know one thing before I ask you the hard questions. When you design a game, are you a nervous designer or are you a calm designer? Like, do you bite your nails?
Am I a calm or nervous designer? Can you see my nails? I don't have any nails. I'm not a nervous designer, I'm a nervous everything. If you sit by me, I'm driving, and I can see my nails, I'm gonna chew it off. So I try to cut them so low that I can't possibly chew them. Super nervous about everything.
David, you're a pretty prolific designer. I mean, you got another game on Kickstarter happening right now, a post-apocalyptic war game called For What Remains, and now we have this one, Europe Divided, that you've just designed, and we're kickstarting. So these two games are completely different. Okay, so in Europe Divided, first of all, what possesses and inspires you to design a game like Europe Divided?
Yeah, so what inspired me to design it? You know, I was about 11, 12 years old when the Cold War was ending. So, I mean, I saw it on the news. I didn't really understand the significance of what was happening at the time. But over these last few decades, I mean, some amazing, important things have happened. And I think they get overlooked because the Cold War itself was so important. And we don't really recognize until we maybe look at the aggregate of all of these events of what's happened. I think, you know, after the Cold War, we have Europe, Western Europe, really expanding at a fast rate. We have NATO, we have the EU expanding. Russia was, you know, from a power perspective, a shell of its former self. And so we just kind of say, oh, okay, well, Western Europe is expanding. There won't be this sort of other power. And I think in the last decade, you know, we recognize that it's largely changed, right? So we have Russia becoming resurgent and really putting pressure in different ways in the Central and Eastern Europe countries, and also back in the Caucasus. So that was the inspiration. About 5 years ago, I decided this was a game I wanted to design. And so through that time, I've been trying to capture that feeling.
What were your design goals for Europe Divided?
So yeah, well, that leads me to the next question, the design goals. So the design goals really were, how do you evoke this period of 3 decades where we have an expansionist Europe, a resurgent Russia. But I knew from the beginning I wanted to evoke a few things. I wanted to show how the EU and NATO, even independent from one another, how bureaucratic and slow they are to react to situations. And then when you combine them both, we're talking extremely slow to respond to world events. On the flip side, you have Russia, much poorer, much worse equipped than the aggregate of NATO, but extremely nimble, both in terms of their political ability to respond and in terms of their military ability to respond, because they are so centralized in their decision making. And so that was the goal. I wanted to show the tension with one player, the EU-NATO player, managing that bureaucracy, and I wanted to show the tension on the Russia side, making decisions, able to respond quickly, but in a resource-constrained position.
David, there's 3 powers in this game. There's the EU, there's Russia, and there's NATO. How are they different?
Okay, Dan, so you asked about the 3 powers. We have the first power. This is the EU. She has lots of money and likes to spend it on nice things. Then we have Russia. Russia likes to start fights. You got to do your pose now. Remember we talked about it for the video. Do your strong pose. All right, and this is the third power. This is NATO. She likes to try to keep the peace. All right, that was it. So yeah, 3 powers. That's what I was talking about. Not the kids, the 3 powers in the game. So, you know, what we're talking about here is the EU and NATO as separate powers played by one player. And then on the other side, Russia. So from the beginning, I wanted there to be 3 powers. When I first started designing it, I had conceived it as a game that might be played as 3 players, 2 versus 1. And I worked through some iterations of that, and no matter how you worked it, that cooperative 2-player side with the EU and NATO, it was, from a mechanical perspective, it created the tension I want, but it wasn't that inner struggle that I was really looking for. And it wasn't until I combined the 2 powers together, but gave it to one player and made them anguish over some of those decisions. And really, the longer you play the game, so as it goes into that second half, and you've exercised influence over parts of Central and Eastern Europe and the Caucasus as the EU and NATO, and you've seen, oh, I've been splitting my influence across two different places and I'm only able to actually manage one now, it becomes extremely challenging, and you start handicapping yourself because of the decisions you made. But what it definitely does is evoke that tension. Now the third power, Russia, which is a player by itself, as I said before, doesn't have that tension, but what they're doing is they're having to play the entire game resource constrained.
How do the players use the cards to drive the action in the game?
Yeah, so it's not a card-driven game, but it does use cards to drive the action. So on the Europe side, on the Western Europe side, they start with a deck of 13 cards. On the Russia side, they start with a deck of just 7 cards. And just like everything else in the game, it's going to take Europe a long time to get through this deck, to manage all these 13 different regions that have influence in either the EU, NATO, or both, versus Russia, which has these cards that are more focused not about the countries or the regions, but rather political or economic or military entities. And so Europe is managing this bigger deck, and not only are they managing it, they have to manage 2 different sets of powers. So a card like the United Kingdom and Ireland, it has EU powers because of both the UK and Ireland being part of the EU. Also has NATO powers because of the United Kingdom being in NATO. You're gonna have to manage your power, or your choice of actions across the card. Every turn you get 4 cards, you only get to use 2, and you're only using 1 action per card. So you're really constrained in your choices of what you're gonna do. Even though each card has a lot of different options, you're only gonna have 4 cards to choose from. So it's gonna take you a while to get through this EU deck, or the Europe deck. You're gonna be going through some great countries, powerful countries like the UK and Ireland, Germany, France, great, strong countries. Then you're gonna get to Greece and you're gonna realize, Greece doesn't have a whole lot of powers. Or you're gonna get to cards like Finland and Austria and Sweden. They don't have any NATO powers at all. So you get a hand with 3 EU countries in it and you can't do any NATO actions. Now Russia doesn't know that, but you're gonna have to deal with that. Russia on the flip side, every card only has to take these Russia actions. You don't have to manage that, but they're not nearly as powerful. You know, Russia's most powerful cards can't match Germany or the UK or France. So you're gonna be getting through that deck quickly. You're gonna have weaker cards overall, but you're gonna have a lot more flexibility. So those are the cards. Now, it's not just that though. As you expand and you exercise influence and gain dominance in some of these contested regions, you have to take on their cards. Well, guess what? Their cards are not as good as your starting cards. So when you expand and you say, oh, I'm gonna go into Georgia, I'm gonna put EU influence into Georgia, great. Now you take this card and you add it to your deck. You start diluting your deck. So you have to spread influence across the region to win the game, but you really start impacting your deck when you do it.
Okay, David Thompson, my last question, so you can not answer these questions and design another game for us, Firstly, how do you score points? How do the players score points? And how do you win the game?
Okay, so how do you score points? Yeah, 2 ways. The first way is with these headline cards. Now, what these cards represent are real key historical events that took place in Europe from the early 90s to this year. And you're going to score them. If you're Europe, you're going for these green events. You're trying to accomplish these events. If you're Russia, you're going for the red events. Throughout the course of the game, you may be putting your own events into play. You may be forced to play some of your opponents. Regardless, there will be an equal distribution over the course of the game. When you put an event into play, you're going to know you have that event to work towards for 4 turns. Now, if you place it yourself, you would have known it was coming ahead of time. You may have made some early preparations for it. But regardless, you'll at least have 4 turns. The complicating factor is you also have these other headlines out there at the same time. So you have the one that's going to resolve currently, so you would have had 4 turns for it. The ones that are coming up, so you would have had a couple of turns. But not only are you trying to accomplish your own, you're also trying to stop your opponent from accomplishing theirs. So it's this push and pull of trying to both accomplish your own and defeat your opponent. Obviously, it's a zero-sum game, so they have equal value. Now, what are you trying to actually do? Each event will tell you the goals you're trying to accomplish. So, for instance, this is the Nagorno-Karabakh War, where Armenia and Azerbaijan were battling for Nagorno-Karabakh. In this, it says, for this to come true, Russia has to have military presence in Armenia and they have to have more Russian influence than NATO. If that's true, when it's time for this card to resolve, they'll score 2 prestige points. This is a very tight scoring game. Typically scores are only in the upper teens at the most, and usually they're only within a point or 2 of each other at the end. The other way to score points is to have dominance in a region. So what is dominance? These dice are not used, you don't roll the dice in the game. These dice are used to track your influence in a region. They start at 1 when you place them, they can go up to 6. Only one of the 2 sides, either Russia or Europe, can have dominance in a region. You'll score a victory point or a prestige point for every region where you have dominance twice in the game. Once at the halfway mark and once again at the end.
David Thompson, thank you very much for answering the hard questions. By the way, you have my address, right? So you can send a check for this? Okay, thanks. See ya. And what you get with this game is lots of cards, lots of tokens, lots of dice. And on the Kickstarter page, there are 3 previews of Europe Divided. One by the Chief, Bonding with Board Games, another one by Alexander and Grant of the Player's Aid, and K. Ludic, a Spanish preview. Professor Riccardo Masini has a podcast out called Checkpoint Charlie 2. Quanta guerra vuoi? How much war do you want? Huh? How much war you want? FAINA has a couple of episodes out of his podcast Il Giannizzero, episode 64, 63, and 62, and also has a San Marino Convention 2019 interview with Enrico Aceni. Consim World Expo 2019 in Arizona, featuring Monster Game Con 19, June 22nd to June 29th, 2019 in Tempe, Arizona. Stella from Maple University is at Origins and she sent me a few pictures. Another week, another show. This was a bit of a heavy week. Lots of stuff happening. Thanks to my supporters. If you're thinking of becoming a supporter, thank you very much. And I'll see you next week.